Have you ever opened up to someone, only to feel the air change in the silence that followed? Almost as if you handed them a fragile piece of yourself and suddenly realized you'd given away too much. That quiet unease, that whisper in your mind saying, I shouldn't have shared that. We've all been there. Sometimes in moments of trust, loneliness, or hope, we reveal more than we intended. Not because we're foolish, but because deep down we long to be understood. And yet as the years pass, we begin to learn a simple but profound truth: not everything sacred needs to be spoken aloud. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago, long before social media, long before everything about us could be posted, tracked, and judged. In today's noisy world, they remind us of something radical: privacy is power. Not secrecy, not paranoia, but quiet ownership of your own life. Because once words leave your lips, they no longer belong solely to you. They can be twisted, misinterpreted, or even used against you. That's why some truths are better protected than exposed. So let me invite you to pause, to reflect. Maybe the wisest thing you can do in this age of endless noise is to keep certain truths close to your chest. Silence, when chosen with intention, is not emptiness, it's freedom. And that brings us to the first lesson. Number 1, age is not your identity. Think about it. How often do we let the world attach meaning to a simple number? The lines on your face, the candles on your cake, the digits you write on a form, they become more than facts, they become forecasts. Society whispers, you're too old for this, you're too young for that, your time has expired. But the Stoics warned us against illusions: the illusion of control, the illusion of permanence, the illusion of time. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Yet so many of us allow our age, something we cannot control, to dictate how we're seen, how we're treated, and even how we treat ourselves. I once heard of a man who walked into a boardroom filled with executives half his age. He spoke with wisdom shaped by decades of experience, failures, and victories alike. But when he casually mentioned he was 72, everything shifted. The tone of the room softened. Their feedback turned from listening to lecturing. Not because he was wrong, but because the number had spoken louder than his ideas. That man felt the sting not of age itself, but of being dismissed too soon. That's why many choose to keep their age private, not from vanity, but from strategy. Because once people know your number, they place you in a box. You're too old to start, too young to understand, too fragile to keep up. Without meaning harm, society clips your wings. There's a quiet moment that happens when a number slips into a conversation. Suddenly, people stop seeing you and start seeing a timeline. Assumptions rush in. Too late to start, time to slow down. Maybe you won't get it. Age, once revealed, becomes a frame, and frames can shrink a masterpiece. The Stoic answer isn't to hide in fear, but to lead with sovereignty. Let your presence speak louder than any digits. We distort time when we obsess over counting it. The more we talk about age, the more we feed a myth of shortage, not enough years, not enough time, while leaving the time we do have unused. The warrior's compass is different. He doesn't tally birthdays, he tallies courage, clarity, and contribution. That shows up in the real world as the colleague who mentors without reminding you how long he's been around, or the founder who ships quietly while others calculate her window. When you choose not to volunteer your age, you aren't hiding, you're choosing how you want to be read by substance, not stereotype. If you've ever felt reduced to a number, try this practice the next time you enter a room led with outcomes. What did you build, solve, teach, heal, or move forward today? Let the work carry your name. It's not the length of your story that moves people, it's the depth of your sentence today. Show up fully to the day you've been given. No calendar can outshine that kind of presence. Now protect the next sacred thing just as fiercely: your relationship with money. Notice how quickly a room changes when finances surface. Voices soften, smiles tighten. Curiosity turns into comparison. Whether you have more than enough or you're still building, the moment people pin a dollar sign to your name, they often stop seeing you. Expectations creep in, favors expand, advice appears, even kindness gets twisted into obligation. What quietly erodes is the very thing the Stoics guarded: your freedom to act from virtue rather than pressure. A wiser path is financial privacy with purpose, not secrecy stewardship. Consider two neighbors. One announces every win, every purchase, every play. Soon every decision is a performance, bigger, louder, riskier. The other keeps a simple rhythm. Lives below their means, gives without posting, invests consistently, and lets generosity arrive without an audience. Which one moves more freely? Which one can change direction without a chorus of opinions? Privacy preserves your margin, your room to breathe, course correct, and be generous without turning another person's need into public content. Here's a grounded way to practice Stoic finance in daily life. Shrink the spotlight. Keep numbers, income, net worth, deal sizes on a need-to-know basis. Lead with values and goals, not figures. Write a dignity rule for giving. Give in ways that protect the receiver's pride and your own integrity. If recognition becomes the point, the gift has already changed hands in the wrong direction. Build boring systems. Automate saving, investing, and debt payoff, so discipline doesn't depend on mood. Quiet systems beat loud intentions. Tie wealth to purpose, not status. Money is a tool to support health, family service, and time freedom. When the purpose is clear, the comparisons get quiet. Remember, when you guard your financial story, you protect more than a balance sheet. You protect the way people relate to you and the way you relate to yourself. The Stoic doesn't measure a life by net worth or birth date. The score that matters is steadiness, the courage to do the right thing, the clarity to ignore the noise, and the contribution that outlives the moment. Age is not your cage. Money is not your mirror. Let your actions define you. Let your privacy defend you. And let your days be measured not by how many you've lived, but by how deeply you live this one. There's a hidden cost when money becomes part of your identity. The moment others know too much about your financial life, something changes. If people think you're wealthy, you stop being a person and start becoming a solution. Favors pile up, expectations grow, and generosity, it loses its soul. A gift without freedom isn't really a gift, it's just a transaction wearing a mask. But swing the pendulum the other way and the outcome is no better. Share too openly about financial struggles and suddenly the room shifts again. People might not say it outright, but it's there in the softened tone, the pity in their eyes, the subtle decline in respect. Instead of encouragement, you're met with unsolicited advice, judgment about your choices, questions about your discipline. In a culture obsessed with success stories, few people know how to respect the quiet dignity of perseverance. The Stoic philosopher Seneca warned us long ago, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." True poverty isn't in your wallet, it's in a restless mind that is always hungry, never content, never still. I'm reminded of Lydia, a woman who ran a small, cozy bookshop. To the world she appeared modest, living in a tiny apartment with simple routines. What nobody knew was that she had once been a powerful executive with investments that could have secured her comfort for the rest of her life. She chose a quieter path, not because she lacked, but because she saw clearly what mattered. When people asked about her lifestyle, she would smile gently and say, "I have what I need," and that was enough. People respected her presence, not her portfolio. This is what financial privacy offers. It's not about secrecy, it's about sovereignty. The less others know, the less they expect, the less they project. And in that quiet autonomy, you gain something rare: the freedom to give without obligation, to act without pressure, and to live without having to justify your path to anyone. Think of the warrior polishing his armor in silence. He doesn't boast about it. He doesn't wear it unless necessary. In the same way, your wealth, whether large or still growing, should whisper, not shout. Let your life reflect your values, not just your valuables. Let generosity surprise others instead of becoming their demand. Let your contentment speak louder than any display. Because money at its best is not the centerpiece of your story. It's a tool, quiet, steady, powerful when used wisely, and best spoken of rarely. And from what we guard in our bank accounts, we now move to something even more delicate: our families. Every home has its truths, its shadows, its untold stories, but not every story is meant for the world outside. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." And perhaps nowhere is this more important than within the walls of our own homes. Family is where we learn to love, to argue, to forgive, and yes, to fail. So ask yourself, do you want to be known for your digits or for your presence, for your birth date or for your wisdom? Because in the end, it's not how many years you've lived that matters, it's how deeply you've chosen to live today. Every family has its stories, some beautiful, some broken, and many still unfinished. These aren't polished chapters meant for public reading. They are private pages, weathered and messy, and there is dignity in keeping them that way. The Stoics remind us we cannot control how others judge, but we can control how we respond to pain, misunderstanding, and imperfection inside our own walls. Epictetus put it simply, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Yet in today's culture of oversharing, people often do the opposite. They speak too quickly, too often, and to the wrong audience. Family struggles get exposed to coworkers, acquaintances, or even strangers online. But those listeners were never part of the story. They only see fragments, and from those fragments they build conclusions. And those conclusions often cut deeper than the original wound. Picture this: a man confides in a colleague about a bitter conflict with his brother, years of silence, and an inheritance dispute. He just wanted to be heard. But within weeks, the story spread, retold, and reshaped. By the time it circled back to his family, it wasn't a confession anymore. It was betrayal. The real damage wasn't in the facts that leaked, it was in the trust that shattered. This is why the Stoic warrior chooses silence, not out of fear of conflict, but out of respect for the sacred. To speak carelessly about family pain is to open old wounds with clumsy hands. Some truths need to be addressed, yes, but the right place is inward, not outward. At the dinner table, on long car rides, in quiet, private moments where honesty has space to heal rather than harm. Protecting family secrets doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means preserving the possibility of resolution, keeping a safe space where the people involved can speak, misunderstand, and try again without the noise of outsiders clouding the air. Because when outsiders step in too early, they don't bring healing, they bring projection, judgment, and more distance. I once heard the story of Teresa, a mother caught between 2 sons who had been at odds for years. Friends often asked her about the conflict, but she never shared details. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was loyal. "This is a storm my boys must weather," she would say, "but I will not invite others to watch them struggle." Years later, the brothers reconciled. Fragile, yes, imperfect, of course, but real and untouched by gossip. There's a reason the word sanctuary implies silence. A home may not always be peaceful, but it is sacred. And that sanctity deserves protection, especially when things fall apart. So speak carefully, speak compassionately, and sometimes choose not to speak at all. Because to honor your family is not to broadcast its flaws, it is to preserve its hope. The warrior who walks this path of restraint does not walk in fear, but in faith in the possibility of restoration. And from the quiet halls of family, we step into another fragile realm, the earliest stages of love. Because like a seedling before a storm, new love grows best when sheltered from too many eyes. This is Stoicism Breath. Guard your family's dignity with silence, and you protect the space where healing can still take root. Have you ever paused before answering that simple question? How are you feeling these days? Not because you wanted to hide something, but because the truth is complicated. One prescription here, a follow-up appointment there. A pill to lower this, a new routine to strengthen that. Slowly it becomes a quiet rhythm in your life, one most people never see, and maybe they shouldn't. Because here's the truth: the moment people start defining you by your prescriptions, they stop seeing the person behind them. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Our health, no matter how hard we try to protect it, will eventually become something we manage more than control. That's not weakness, that's simply life. But while illness may touch the body, it should never be allowed to take over your identity. This is why the Stoic warrior protects the privacy of his health. The moment you share every detail, your diagnoses, your medications, something shifts in how people treat you. Conversations that once celebrated your ideas, your creativity, your wisdom suddenly orbit around your symptoms. You stop being the builder of a life and start being the patient. Their care may be genuine, but their perception narrows. They see your current struggle, not your enduring strength. Take Daniel, for example. In his early 60s, he was sharp, generous, and deeply respected in his community. But after casually mentioning his blood pressure medication, something changed. Friends started offering endless health tips, recommending herbal remedies, and telling him to skip activities he loved like hiking. Their intentions were kind, but Daniel felt unseen. He hadn't changed. Only their perception of him had. That's the danger of oversharing. It doesn't just invite compassion, it invites projection. Suddenly everyone becomes a doctor, everyone has advice, and in the process your dignity erodes not from cruelty but from misplaced concern. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. Carrying illness with quiet strength demands a bravery most people will never recognize." That's why setting boundaries is vital. Share what is necessary with your doctors. Confide only in those who have earned the right to hear it. But beyond that, let silence be your ally, because your health is not your whole story. You are more than test results and treatments. You are the sum of your thoughts, your values, your purpose. Illness may shape the rhythm of your days, but it does not define your soul. And when others don't know the full picture, they are more likely to see you for who you are, a whole, capable human being walking through life with discipline and quiet fire. So be selective. Protect your strength by protecting your story. Let your resilience speak louder than any medical chart. And remember, the warrior's health is not broadcast, it is lived with courage and with grace. There's a strength in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Speak when it brings healing. Stay silent when it preserves your peace. A true warrior doesn't need to announce every battle, he simply keeps walking steady and unshaken. If you've ever chosen silence to protect your strength, type the words "inner resilience" in the comments below. And if this message resonates, subscribe to Stoicism Breath, where we value depth, not noise. Now, from matters of the body, we step into something even more vulnerable: love. Specifically, the early sparks of a relationship. Because the truth is, love grows best in silence. Think about it. Have you ever watched two people in love exchange a glance that needed no words, just a quiet knowing? A moment so tender that the rest of the world seemed to fade away. That kind of intimacy is rare. And in today's culture of oversharing, where everything becomes a post, a story, or an update, it's even more precious. The truth about intimacy is this: it doesn't fade with time, it transforms. Some people assume love weakens as we age, that passion burns out, that romance loses its spark. Others mock it, or worse, turn it into a spectacle, but real intimacy doesn't disappear, it deepens. With age comes a love that's rooted not in novelty but in trust, not in performance but in presence, and the deeper it becomes, the more it demands protection. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When your private life is invaded by the noise of public opinion, peace fractures. The most sacred parts of your being, your desires, your tenderness, your ability to love, should never be reduced to gossip or entertainment. They are not headlines. They are sacred ground. I once knew a couple, Jonas and Mir. In their late 60s, they walked hand in hand like newlyweds. There was a warmth about them that drew people in. But here's what made their bond strong: it wasn't what they shared with the world. It was what they kept only for each other. They never spoke publicly about their private life. They never invited applause. And in that privacy, they found freedom. Not the freedom to hide, but the freedom to be real without the pressure of performing for others. The Stoics would have honored that choice. Seneca reminds us, enjoy present pleasures in such a way as not to injure future ones. When we talk too openly about our love lives, we risk weakening them. Because intimacy thrives on trust, And trust is built in silence, in subtle gestures, in moments that belong to no one but the two who share them. But when outsiders intrude through questions, commentary, or assumptions, something shifts. What was sacred becomes social currency. What was private becomes public property. And once that happens, it's no longer love in its purest form, it's performance. As we grow older, our needs may change, but our dignity does not. The Stoic warrior knows that not everything must be defended out loud. Some things are best protected by never letting the world in. That is not weakness, it's wisdom. That is not shame, it's sovereignty. So guard your love with silence. Protect it not because you're afraid, but because you understand its value. In a world that constantly demands exposure, there is immense power in choosing restraint. And sometimes silence is the loudest way to say, this is mine, this is sacred, this is real. Choosing to keep your intimate life private is not about shame, it's about respect. Respect for yourself, for your partner, and for the sacred space you've built together. It's about refusing to let the world reduce your joy to a punchline or your tenderness to a rumor. You don't owe anyone your story. You owe it only to those who have earned the right to be part of it. So protect what is sacred. Speak carefully, if at all. Not because you fear being misunderstood, but because you know its value. Let your love grow not in the harsh spotlight of public opinion, but in the quiet warmth of its own truth. And this principle doesn't just apply to love. It extends into other corners of life like your goals, your generosity, and the way you live your values. Because some things once displayed lose their soul. Which brings us to the next lesson: give without needing applause. Have you ever noticed how often people do something good and then quickly look around to see if anyone noticed? A helping hand offered but with a sideways glance. A donation made but immediately posted online. In moments like these, something sacred is quietly lost. Because real charity isn't meant to be a performance, it's meant to be a connection. It's meant to live in the heart of the giver and in the dignity of the receiver. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not to be lived by reference to others, but by following the inner light. That inner light, when steady, guides us towards service without spectacle." The Stoics understood this deeply. Virtue exists for its own sake, not for recognition, not for applause. The only question that matters is simple. Did I give for the right reason from the right place? In today's world, where applause and authenticity often get confused, it's easy to forget that quiet generosity is often the most powerful kind. The Stoic warrior knows this. He doesn't give to be seen. He gives because it's the right way to live, without cameras, without expectation, without turning someone else's hardship into a stage for his own virtue. I'm reminded of Haruto, an elderly man who lived on the edge of a small town. Every winter, when the cold set in, families who couldn't afford heating would find stacks of firewood waiting on their porches. No one ever saw who brought it. No notes, no signatures, no requests for thanks. For over 20 winters, Haruto quietly chopped and delivered that wood himself. It wasn't until he passed away that the truth came out, revealed by a neighbor. For decades, Haruto carried out a legacy of love far louder than words, without ever speaking of it. Seneca warned us, a benefit is rendered worthless by the expectation of gratitude. The moment we give to be thanked, admired, or remembered, we distort the act itself. What could have been virtue becomes performance. And performance, no matter how polished, can never replace the real thing. True generosity doesn't need to be repaid. It doesn't need to be broadcast. It simply flows quietly, consistently, and without strings attached. And in that silence, it becomes something far more powerful than applause. It becomes virtue in action. True generosity doesn't keep score. It doesn't linger, waiting for applause. It disappears the moment it's done, leaving only the quiet impact behind. But there's another side of giving we often forget. Not everyone wants to be known as someone in need. When you give publicly, you might unintentionally take something away: their dignity, their right to carry a burden quietly, their ability to accept help without being turned into a spectacle. The deepest kindness is the one that lifts someone up without announcing they had fallen. That's why discretion in giving isn't just about modesty, it's about respect. It's about honoring the invisible bond between two souls and protecting the sacredness of a moment that belongs to neither pride nor pity. The Stoics remind us virtue is inward, it's silent, it asks for nothing. And when giving flows from that place, it purifies both the giver and the receiver. There's no need for proof or validation or for credit. The act itself is the reward. So when you give generously, give wisely, but above all, give quietly. Let your charity move like an underground river, steady, unseen, yet life-giving. Not because the world is watching, but simply because someone needed you and you answered. And from here we turn from giving to another kind of wealth, one that can't be measured in money but in character. Because just as generosity loses power when it becomes performance, so does honor. Number 7. Let honor speak quietly. Ask yourself this when you sit alone in a quiet room away from the noise and attention: what remains? Not the applause, not the titles, not the trophies. What stays is your name, your presence, the echo of how you treated others. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And when those reactions are repeated again and again, they shape your character. That character becomes your honor not through grand gestures, but through the small unseen decisions you make daily." The Stoics knew this truth. Honor is not something you post or demand. Honor is something you become, and yet the temptation is always there. As we grow older and our stories get longer, we want them remembered. We want people to know the sacrifices, the struggles, the victories. But the more we talk about them, the more they risk becoming performance instead of proof. Honor is like a flame. It needs air, but not too much. Fan it constantly with pride, and it flickers out under the weight of self-importance. There's a story of a man named Elias, a decorated officer who had seen battles, earned medals, and carried a legacy worth telling. But he never spoke of it. Instead, he ran a quiet coffee shop in a small town. What he offered most freely wasn't his war stories, but his presence. He listened. He served. And only years later did a traveler stumble upon an old newspaper that revealed the depth of his past. Elias didn't need to announce his honor. He lived it. And in silence, his honor spoke louder than words ever could. When asked why he never spoke of his decorated past, Elias simply smiled and said, "What matters most isn't what I've done. It's how I live now." That single sentence carries the weight of Stoic wisdom. Seneca warned us it is the mark of an unstable mind to seek admiration from others. Because the truth is this: when your identity depends on validation, it's always fragile. Praise is like the wind, it shifts with the seasons. But the warrior does not build his life on applause, he builds it on principle. The right way to walk through life is not with a trumpet in hand announcing every step, but with steadiness in every step you take. When you boast, you invite comparison, you provoke envy, you turn what could have been shared humanity into a subtle competition. And in the process, you lose something precious: the quiet respect that comes not from what you say, but from what people see and how you live. The man who constantly reminds others of his greatness is often the man most terrified of being forgotten. But honor, when kept private, gains power. It becomes part of your posture, part of your presence. You walk into a room and people sense it not because you've shouted it, but because of the way you carry your silence. That's not mystery, that's mastery. So let your work speak. Let your consistency speak. Let the way you treat people speak. And say nothing unless it adds truth or grace, because you are not your resume. You are not your followers. You are what remains when the world stops watching and the quiet still respects you. From here we arrive at one final form of silence, the silence that guards your future. Even your goals, your dreams deserve protection before they're ready to stand on their own. Some visions are like seeds, they need the dark to take root before they can bloom. And yet there is another weight we must learn to release: the heavy load of insults. Have you ever laid awake at night replaying a moment that should have passed long ago? A sharp word, a mocking laugh, a conversation that ended quickly but echoed for years. We tell ourselves we've moved on, but the sting remains not on the skin, but buried deep beneath pride, beneath memory, beneath the version of ourselves who stood there when it happened. Epictetus put it bluntly, if someone is able to provoke you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That's a hard truth, because we want to believe the pain belongs to them, not us. But the Stoics knew differently. It's not the insult itself that harms us, it's the space we give it in our minds, the attention we continue to pay, the power we choose to hand over. Think about it, most people don't insult us with strategy. They react from their own pain, their own insecurities, their own limitations. And yet we absorb their words as if they were carved in stone. We replay them. We build entire stories around them. We defend ourselves in imaginary arguments that no one else will ever hear. But the warrior does not carry another person's weakness on his back. He does not bleed forever from one shallow wound. He walks forward deliberately, cleanly, not because he was never hurt, but because he chose not to let the hurt define him. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The world will hurt you. People will misunderstand you. Some will belittle you without cause, but they cannot live inside your thoughts unless you invite them in. And every time you repeat their insult in the privacy of your own mind, you let them speak again, and that's where the choice lies with you. Victor grew up carrying a shadow that wasn't his own. As a young man, he stuttered, and because of it, he dreaded introductions, job interviews, even the sound of his own voice. One day after stumbling through a presentation, someone in the back of the room laughed and muttered, "Maybe this guy should stick to silence." The remark was careless. The room quickly moved on. But Victor carried those 10 words for over a decade long after the speaker had forgotten them. Years later, Victor had rebuilt his life into something steady and meaningful. He owned a small bookstore, led public readings, even mentored students in communication. But through all of it, he never repeated that insult, not to his wife, not to his closest friends. He made a radical choice not to share the wound, not to wear it like a badge, not to let someone else's weakness define the arc of his life. He once explained, "I didn't need anyone to validate that I had been hurt. I just needed to stop keeping the wound open." That is the Stoic way. Not suppression, not pretending it never happened, but a refusal to let pain turn into identity. Forgiveness in the Stoic sense isn't about making peace with the offender, it's about reclaiming peace for yourself. It's about letting go. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. And sometimes silence is the most powerful act of release. When you stop talking about who hurt you, when you stop gathering sympathy like armor, when you stop using the past as an excuse for being trapped in the present, that's when true healing begins. Not loudly, not for an audience, but quietly, inwardly, deeply. We live in a culture where trauma often becomes a kind of currency. Pain gets turned into performance. But the Stoic doesn't parade his wounds for approval. He tends to them like a warrior, privately, patiently, without asking the world to understand. Because some burdens only grow heavier the more hands touch them. So keep your old insults private. Not because they weren't real, but because they no longer belong in the life you are building. They are fragments, not your definition. Pages, not your entire story. Letting go is not weakness. It is a form of strength that doesn't shout, it simply no longer flinches. And with that release, your hands are free again. Free not for revenge, not for validation, but for peace. And with the weight of the past finally shed, we arrive at the final silence, the silence that protects your future. Because your deepest goals, your dreams, your vision for tomorrow, they don't need to be broadcast before they're ready. Some things gain power in the dark, nurtured quietly until they are strong enough to stand. Privacy isn't hiding, it's honoring what is sacred. When you protect certain parts of your life, you aren't withdrawing from the world. You are standing firm in what is yours. The Stoics taught that true strength is found in restraint. Peace does not come from being understood by everyone, but from being deeply rooted in yourself. By guarding these 8 parts of your life, your age, your wealth, your family, your health, your love, your generosity, your honor, and your scars, you are not losing connection. You are preserving clarity, dignity, and control. If this message resonates, leave a comment with the words "quiet strength." A small act of intention, a reminder that you walk this path with purpose. And if you find value in these reflections, subscribe to Stoicism Breath, not for noise, but for a space where stillness is honored and thoughtfulness is nurtured. Your path doesn't end here. In the next video, we'll go deeper into the quiet practices that build unshakable character. Until then, carry your silence with pride and let it speak for you.